In this section, we're going to look at interacting with the page in our end-to-end tests. One of the things that I can do on the event details page is change the filter for the level of sessions. If I select introductory, then only 2 sessions are shown. So let's write a test for that exact scenario. Now in order to change the value of that dropdown, I need to see the HTML first. So looking at the HTML here, I can see that that dropdown is this select element right here. This select element is bound to the model of query, and the value that I want to set it to is introductory, all lowercase. So let's go back to the test, and I'll write select, which lets me select a dropdown option. And the parameter that I'm going to give it is the name of that ng model value, which is query. Then I call option, and I pass in the value of the option I want to select. And that's how you select an option in a dropdown. The next thing I want to do is count those list items. So I can use essentially the same code, but just change the 5 to a 2. All right. The next scenario that I want to test is to take another action as well. This time I don't want to filter the results, but I want to sort them differently. So you can see when I sort the sessions by votes, the first session is how to program instead of how to be awesome. So let's write that test. Now again, I need to double check the HTML to see how I can select that sort order. In this case, the model that sort order is bound to is called sort order, and the value that I want to select is minus upvote count. And now I want to check that the text of the first stage 4 is how to program. So to make it easy, I'm just going to select this expectation and change the text. And now that that one's done, I want to do one more test. This test is going to be a little bit more difficult. In our application, when I want to vote for a session, it requires that I'm logged in. So if I click the upvote, it takes me to the login page. So if I log in using the user Bob, I can go back to that and I can vote now. So I'd like to test the voting functionality, but in our test I'm going to need to log in order to vote. So writing that test is going to involve a few more steps. So I'm going to start off by navigating to the login page. And after I go there, I want to type in the username and password and then click the login button. In order to enter a value into an input box, I use the input function. But now I need to look at the HTML so I can find the correct element. The input element I want to use is this input element right here. Scrolling over, you can see that the model that it's bound to is user.username. That's the key that we use in order to put values into input boxes inside of Angular's end-to-end tests. And then I call the enter function and pass in the string that's the username. And I need to do the same thing for password. Now I also need to click on the button to log in. So going to that HTML, looking at this button, I can see that it's a button element and its class is btn. So I can grab that button by calling the element function and asking for the button that has a class of btn. And then I can call the click function on it. This will click that button and log me in. Now let's go and see what happens when we log in. So first I need to log back out. And I log in as Bob. And notice that I go to the events page. In order to go from the events page to the event detail page, I have to click on the event thumbnail. So I need to replicate that next in my end-to-end test. So let's go back and I'll just examine the HTML here. And I can see that this is a div with the class of well. And I'm clicking on the very first one. So we'll use that to select the correct element to click on. Okay, now that's going to take me to the correct page. Now you may be wondering why I don't just call browser.navigateTo after I log in. The reason I'm not doing that in my particular scenario is because we're not using cookies for authentication in this application. Again, this is not a best practice, but since browser.navigateTo actually issues a GET request, my login will disappear. And now that I'm on the correct page, I need to figure out how to click the vote button. So let's look at the upvote directive and see what that HTML looks like. The item I actually want to click on is this div right here. Clicking this element will cause the upvote function to be called. So this div has a class of voting button, and since I want to vote for the very first session on the page, I can just grab the very first div on the page that has the voting button class. And then I call click on that. And now the last thing I need to do is create my expectation that will check that the vote count has gone from 0 to 1. Now I need to know what element in order to grab and look at its text. So let's go back to our voting widget. And we can see that what I want to look at is this particular div right here. Well, now I have a small problem. This div doesn't really have much that lets me grab it easily. So what I'm going to do, just for convenience sake, is add a special class to this div, just so that it's easier to grab in my end-to-end test. And now that I have that class in place, I can just grab the very first one of these. And now let's run that test. That was the last scenario that I wanted to test. This gives us a very good introduction to end-to-end testing in Angular. It shows a lot of the methods that we can use to manipulate our pages and do end-to-end tests.